Game releases are picking up even more in February, and PlayStation 4 owners have a lot of games to be looking forward to, all of different genre and styles. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at every big PlayStation 4 title that's set to release in February. Let's get right into this. First off, let's start off with arguably the most anticipated title in Shadow of the Colossus. Now, Shadow of the Colossus was a game that was originally released on the PlayStation 2, but this Shadow of the Colossus title will be a full-on remake built ground up for the PlayStation 4. This isn't your typical HD remastering. We already saw that with the Team Eco collection on the PlayStation 3. Rather, you are getting Shadow of the Colossus with modern-day visuals. It uses ultra-high definition art assets, and the remake is actually led by Bluepoint, who worked on a lot of these remastering and remake titles before, and they're receiving assistance from the original Sony Japan studio. The game itself will play the same as the original title, but they will introduce a new control scheme for those of you that want a more modernized style of control. And so far from what we've seen, the game looks fantastic, and if you played the original Shadow of the Colossus, you know how good of a game that is, and to be able to revisit it on the PlayStation 4 is going to be great. And if you never played Shadow of the Colossus, now is the time to jump in. Shadow of the Colossus is hitting the PlayStation 4 on February 6th. Sword Art Online Fatal Bullet. Sword Art Online is one of the more interesting anime. There is a gigantic following behind it, but there's also a large contingency that aren't a big fan of it and will make that known. However, there's no doubt that Sword Art Online is one of the more recognizable Japanese properties, and it's also made a relatively successful transition into the video game realm. Unfortunately, with a couple of the past Sword Art Online video games that have hit the States, some of them feature really bad translation issues, and as far as gameplay goes, they're not as polished as can be, but they have been getting better, and Sword Art Online Fatal Bullet actually looks pretty solid. It takes the Sword Art Online universe into Gun Gale Online, which, if you're familiar with the anime, that was where a big portion of the second season revolved around, and it has more third-person shooting elements as you would expect, but still you've got a lot of hacking and slashing. For fans of Sword Art Online, Fatal Bullet is going to be right up your alley, and it hits the PlayStation 4 on February 8th. Metal Gear Survive. So Metal Gear Survive is a game that's getting a ton of vitriol, and understandably so. We know all the controversy that happened with Metal Gear Solid 5, Hideo Kojima and Konami, and now they're bringing out another game with Metal Gear slapped onto the title. Hideo Kojima didn't work on it, so I can understand how it soured some people. However, you should give the game a chance for what it is. Metal Gear Survive itself is a survival action-adventure game set in an open-world environment, and it features cooperative multiplayer where the player can be joined up to 3 other players to explore the game's world and to complete missions. You can obviously play the game solo, but then you'll be accompanied by 3 AI teammates. We've seen a lot of cooperative focused games go that route, and usually it's best played with a couple of friends. It looks like a pretty interesting game. Do not expect something that's typical of your Metal Gear experience. This is a far different game, and it's more about being a survival game rather than being this engrossing single-player experience. Far different. You could have released this game without the Metal Gear tagline, but obviously that is gonna lure some people in. Hopefully the game itself turns out well, and considering the fact that expectations are pretty low right now, maybe it can surprise us as Metal Gear Survive hits the PlayStation 4 on February 20th. The 7 Deadly Sins: Knights of Britannia. The 7 Deadly Sins is another anime that's recently gained some traction. It's obviously not at the level of Sword Art Online in terms of mainstream attention. However, quality-wise, it seems like most would prefer 7 Deadly Sins, but let's not get into that debate right now. The 7 Deadly Sins is also making its transition into the video game realm now with Knights of Britannia, and it's coming to consoles for the very first time. Now, this is an action-oriented experience. If you look at the gameplay, it'll remind you something of a Dynasty Warriors type of game. Very fast-paced action gameplay, might get a little bit repetitive, but visually it does look really good, and if you're a fan of the 7 Deadly Sins, you're probably going to enjoy Knights of Britannia, but don't expect something blowaway. It hits the PlayStation 4 on February 9th. Dynasty Warriors 9. Now, Dynasty Warriors has been one of the most consistent franchises in all of gaming. They're very fast-paced hack-and-slash games, but often they are criticized for being a little bit repetitive, but nonetheless, they have amassed an audience for these games, and Dynasty Warriors 9 seems like a big evolutionary title in the franchise. This is the first title in the series that will introduce an open world environment. A traversable map of China will be implemented, and you can freely roam on foot, horseback, or boat. And the game will focus on livable environments such as cities and towns, as well as places where large battles take place. If you've never played the Dynasty Warriors games, Dynasty Warriors 9 might be the title to introduce the series to a more mainstream audience. Let's not get our expectations up too high, but it is shaping up very nicely. We'll find out how the game turns out when it hits the PlayStation 4 on February 13th. Kingdom Come Deliverance. Kingdom Come Deliverance is an open-world action RPG that's been in development for quite a while. It's coming from the guys over at Warhorse Studio, and the game itself is set in the medieval kingdom of Bohemia. It's an RPG that really puts the power into the player's hand, and it utilizes a classless RPG system. That'll allow you to customize your skill and take on roles such as warrior, bard, thief, or hybrids of all of them. That's very interesting, and abilities and stats will grow depending on what you do throughout the game. The story seems interesting, and visually it's obviously very good. The game itself is running on the Cry engine, which has produced some of the best looking games of all time. Just look at Crysis. Who knows how Kingdom Come Deliverance is going to turn out? When a game's been in development as long as Kingdom Come Deliverance has, you have to proceed with a little bit of caution, but the game itself does look pretty good, and we'll find out exactly how good it is when it comes to the PlayStation 4 on February 13th.
And not your fists.
Henry, help us!
Help us, son. Don't be a coward.
If Sigismund attacks, they can't hold.
We have to prepare for the worst.
You spend all your days drinking and chasing wenches. What kind of fool are you, boy?
You have courage, but you need training, arms, a horse.
Please, take me into your service and give me the chance to learn these things.
Owlboy. Owlboy was a game that originally released on the PC back in 2016, and this is a game that featured a very long development cycle, dating back to 2007, so you can tell that a lot of time was spent on the game. But while I just mentioned you have to proceed with games that have been in development for a very long time with a little bit of skepticism, Owlboy proves that those games can still turn out really good, and it was met with mass critical acclaim. The game itself is sitting on an 88 on Metacritic, and IGN gave it a 9.3 out of 10. Visually, it's very charming, and it's got this Metroidvania style of gameplay that looks very engaging, and Owlboy will be hitting the PlayStation 4 now, and it's great to see a game that was in development for so long still turn out to be great. PlayStation 4 users will get their hands on it February 13th. Secret of Mana Remake. Secret of Mana is one of the more iconic JRPGs of all time. It was put out by Square, but it's definitely not at the level of recognition of, say, a Final Fantasy, but those that played it back on the Super Nintendo really enjoyed it, and unlike a lot of RPGs, namely JRPGs released around that same time, Secret of Mana featured real-time battles instead of turn-based battles. It's got a lot of unique mechanics, and this remake is a full-on 3D remake. It looks a lot better. However, it's not at the technical level of a lot of other titles, but it is also being released at a budget price point, so that's okay. The game itself is gonna be great. Secret of Mana Remake hits February 15th.
What's a sword doing here? I don't think I would have made it here without you two.
And finally, Guns of Icarus Alliance. Guns of Icarus Alliance is a spin-off of Guns of Icarus, and it's a team-based online game that pits co-op crews against both rival teams and an AI that learns your tactics. Guns of Icarus has been one of the more recognizable multiplayer games, and it's got a great steampunk setting that does set it out from the rest of the pack. Guns of Icarus Alliance looks to be a very unique experience, and it's great to see the PlayStation 4 getting it. You'll be able to check it out on February 20th. So that wraps up every big game hitting the PlayStation 4 in February 2018. What do you think? Which games are you checking out next month? Let us know in the comments section down below. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.